Cycling Podcast Féminin in association with Rapha. From grand tours to group rides, the Champs-Élysées to coffee stops, Rapha exists to celebrate the world's most beautiful sport.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, brought to you by Skoda. Dedicated to closing the gender gap in cycling, one race, one cyclist at a time. This is our time.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Rose Manley.
Hello.
Fresh back from her holiday.
I am.
Looking tanned and well, Rose.
Thank you very much.
Where have you been?
Not as glowing as Orla, it must be said.
And Orla Chennaoui.
Well, thank you. The afterthought. Hello.
You're looking well as well, Orla.
Thank you very much. I'm pre-holiday though. I'm in need of one.
Aren't we all? Well, apart from Rose. Where were you, Rose?
I was in Zadar in Croatia.
Nice.
For a week. Very nice. Recommended. I didn't go to Croatia at all my whole life, and then I ended up going 4 times in 6 months.
It's a tax thing, isn't it?
So yeah, it sounds like it.
Well, you missed some good racing.
I was here for the Euros and then I was
Went
away.
off. Yeah, well, we have got lots to pack into this month's episode. Last month we were in France, weren't we?
I know, it feels like a long time ago, doesn't
like
it?
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got, we should say thanks again to Skoda for continuing to back the Cycling Podcast Féminin and our headline sponsor, Rapha, of course. And we are, next month we're going to the World Championships, you and I, Orla.
We
to
are.
cover them and do some Cycling Podcast Féminin stuff from there. But we've got lots to pack in this month. We're going to hear the UCI president, David Lappartient, who I spoke to during the Tour de France. We're going to hear from Sophie Wright, who lit up, really, the European Road Race Championship in Glasgow with a long kind of solo attack. We'll hear a little bit from Kasia Niewiadoma. We'll hear from Servais Knaven, the Team Sky Sports Director. Why will we hear from him? We're going to find out later.
Tease it. Yeah, leave it there.
Before any of that, Orla, we'll also have details of our Rapha Women's 100, the first Cycling Podcast Féminin Rapha Women's 100 ride coming up on September the 15th, which I know you're really looking forward to, Orla.
Well, now at least you know why I wasn't fully committed to it before.
You've got some news of your own. I don't know if this was going to be in your news roundup.
Yes, because I'm that self-indulgent and self-absorbed. The start of the news roundup is... Yes, I'm with child. Yes, pregnant, expecting.
I hope it's a boy, just to balance up the gender balance a little bit in this room.
Well, yeah, it could be two and two right now. True. We don't know.
Don't know.
Don't know yet.
But you're still. I mean, I was sending you pictures of pregnant ladies on bikes as inspiration slash bullying.
Yeah, yeah. None of those pictures you sent me were particularly inspiring. It was more like a warning. Here's how you will look on a bike.
No.
I also don't know where you got them from.
I know they were half naked as well. They were bellies hanging out.
They literally turn up like that, like on the WhatsApp group. Suddenly,
it's amazing what you can find.
Look at your hard drive.
I'll do my own version. I have to wait for the belly to get a bit bigger first. But yeah, I'll do my own version just for the podcast.
The secrets of the WhatsApp group.
I will never do that. Fear
what about
not.
Lizzie Dignan? Is she not inspiration? She's been riding her bike.
She's been really inspirational, actually. And I like her little hashtag that she uses on Instagram, pregnant, not powerless. She's been using that a lot. And yeah, she's been inspiring me to not get on my bike, but to stay fit, get fit. Yeah.
Anyway, you'll be there, won't you, on September the 15th?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Excellent.
I'm not ill.
Come
Starts
on.
already.
Oh dear. Oh no. Anyway, Orla, give us a news roundup, please.
Right, the actual news roundup.
If you're capable of that.
If I'm up to it, I'll put my feet up here. Take it easy. Right, well, we start with the Prudential Ride London Classic. We didn't cover that because we were at the tour. We missed it, didn't we, in the last episode? So that was Kirsten Wild winning for the second time after her win in 2016. It was a headwind sprint. The Dutch woman beat the then European champion Marianne Vos with Elisa Balsamo of Valcar PBM in third. Now, the shortest, flattest women's World Tour race, but the biggest prize fund, €100,000 on offer, €25,000 for the winner. And it's worth mentioning the sprints because a significant amount of money on offer there as well. 3 intermediate sprints, won by Amy Peters, Danny Rowe and Amy Peters again. But Danny Rowe, because of her positioning in those sprints, managed to get enough points to win the sprint competition, the €5,000 that went with it. There were a few attacks through the race. The sprinters never lost control though. Mitchelton Scott had a very good showing in the final 3 laps for Julian Dora. Others organised themselves in the final 10 kilometres. Mitchelton Scott, Ali Cipollini, Wiggle High Five for Lisa Brennauer leading out Kirsten Wild. At the Flamme Rouge, Sunweb came to the front for last year's winner, Corinne Rivera. Rivera, though, had to drop back a few positions when Trixie Warwick of Canyon Shram put Alice Barnes into the Sunweb train rather expertly. She had to practically sprint Corinne Rivera to get back onto the back of her train. There was a touch of wheels, a crash at around 20th position, a number of riders brought down. And then to the sharp end of the race, Marianne Vos started her effort from 14th position, got herself up to first, but Wild immediately jumped when Vos came past. Rivera was still up there, but couldn't keep her top speed, peeled off and ended up in 6th. Vos had a very long sprint, faded towards the end, and Wild came past to win by half a bike length. Elisa Balsamo had followed Will's wheel and she finished in 3rd. And that was Will's 5th win of this year, so a very good season for her. So then we had the European time trial and road race. The time trial, a 30-kilometre course, won by Ellen van Dijk. Anna van der Breggen, the defending champion, in 2nd, and Trixie Warwick in 3rd. Quite remarkable, actually, performance by Ellen van Dijk and Anna van der Breggen. Just 2 seconds between the Dutch 1 and 2. And what's most remarkable is that the margin between 1st and 2nd was so fine, and yet no other rider finished within a minute of the gold medal ride. So those two way out front. European road race then was won by Marta Bastianelli, with defending champion again Marianne Vos in 2nd and Lisa Brennauer in 3rd. So both European races, the defending champion finished in 2nd. And Bastianelli won the sprint from a reduced group. She said afterwards it was very hard, very technical, very fast. The Dutch dominated much of the day actually, but unable to take advantage in the end. And you mentioned already, Richard, Sophie Wright really lit up the race. 61 kilometres to go. She was out front with a gap of over 1 minute at one stage, with a field more than 2 minutes and 30 back. Spain and the Netherlands tried to bring her back, but she made it to the 6th lap with the gap roughly the same, but she was caught in the end. Now with 21 kilometres to go, Anna van der Breggen and Elisa Longo-Borghini made it out front. Danny Rowe was the only rider to make it across, but it was van der Breggen and Elisa Longo-Borghini who ended up going pretty much, well, I think it was until the final kilometre, wasn't it? Very strange racing, I think, from van der Breggen. Did not see that orange jersey go to the front until about 3 kilometres to go when they were attacking each other. So with her refusing to pull, Longo-Borghini unable to drop her, they were caught at the Flamme Rouge, so a group of 25 contesting the sprint. And Marta Bastianelli jumping for the win and doing it for the mums of the peloton. Very few of those. Then
good European championships for mothers, because Laura Kenny in the track as well.
What Team Pursuit? She
won the elimination race. She won.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing it for the mums.
# pregnant, not powerless.
Very good. You've been listening. I like it. For Garda then, the team time trial and the road race. The team time trial won by Bowles Dolmans for the 3rd year in a row, Sunweb in 2nd and Cervelo Bigla in 3rd. And I noticed in Bowles Dolmans' team, half of that squad were Dutch, so that augurs very well for them ahead of the World Championships. And in the road race in Vargarda, a personal highlight of this news roundup, Marianne Vos won. Woo woo!
Not that we're biased.
Not that we're biased, but it's lovely. That made me very happy indeed to see her get the win, because she has just been up there all season. I think 12 podiums or something. So a brilliant win for her. Kirsten Wild in 2nd and the defending champion Lotte Lepisto in 3rd. And just a fantastic finish by Marianne Vos. You guys mentioned it in the Me and Cycling podcast, but just a beautiful final corner for her. Took the absolute perfect line and no one could catch her. It was a beautiful finish. Then we had the Ladies Tour of Norway, which is just getting underway today, but it started already with a standalone team time trial on Thursday. Much shorter than the Swedish race, 24.3 kilometres instead of 42.5. And it was Team Sunweb who took the win this time, winning in Norway once again, 11 months after taking the world title in Bergen. Mitchelton Scott were second, Cervelo Bigla in third. Now, interestingly, Boels Dolmans made 2 changes to the Vargarda team time trial squad and finished in 6th. One of the absent riders being Anna van der Breggen, but she stays top of the Women's World Tour ranking anyway. In other news, very briefly, transfer news, Katie Hall and Eva Berman are moving to Boels Dolmans. Berman coming from Trek Drops, of course. She won the Best Young Rider at the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race and has earned 6 top 10 places throughout the season. Hall making the transition to Europe from the US after winning this year's Amgen Women's Tour, amongst many other things. Georgia Bronzini has announced that she will become a DS at the newly formed Women's Trek team. She'll be bringing her 16-year career as a racer to an end at the end of this season, and she'll join her former German rival Ina Teutenberg on the team. Wiggle High 5, we'll be discussing this a little bit later. Many of you will have seen, heard, read the news that they will be folding at the end of this year. Plenty to talk about there. And United Healthcare have said that they are set to fold if a new sponsor can't be found by the 30th of August. Their management company, Momentum Sports Group, have until then to keep the team going for next year. If they can't, they said they'll refocus on 2020, which seems a little bit ambitious, really, because I imagine that's difficult to keep the momentum going when you'll have lost the riders, the team, all the rest of it. And obviously, Katie Hall, the team's star climber, has already announced that she's leaving anyway to join Boels Dolmans next year. So I think that's my news roundup.
Ooh.
Very nice.
Excellent. Well, a couple of interesting races that you mentioned. Vargarda, I watched that from start to finish, but I actually needed to watch the final 300 metres, really. I mean, it's a beautiful race, and it's a very popular race because it's really well organised, well supported, and so on. But it's,
and standalone.
Yeah, and standalone,
well,
yeah. And it's a lovely race, and it's a beautiful part of the world, but it's not it's a little gravel climb, but it's not the most challenging course. It was interesting to see the teams go at each other, and when a break went, there was always one team missing, and wow, Deals were quite prominent at the front, trying to keep things together for Marianne Vos. I remember that race last year. Hannah Barnes was in the leading break, and she went the wrong way around the traffic island just before the final corner. Vos did kind of completely the opposite. She, they've been round the circuit many times, they know the corner very well, but the line that she took into it was exceptional. Before that, Anna van der Breggen had been on the attack, and it occurred to me it was the third major race in a row after La Course and the European Championships and now Vargarda where she's looked to be in a race-winning position and hasn't won, which is very unusual for her, albeit on this occasion, Vargarda, it wasn't the perfect course for her talents, but she's away on her own. The damage that did behind was extraordinary. They were flat out chasing her. The gap was like 20-30 seconds, no more than that. And the riders just dropping out the back were just, it was that you could see from the riders being shelled out the back just how hard Van der Breggen was going. So I don't think there's any question about her form or her strength at the moment. But it was, she was caught, and Vos, a brilliant win. And we talked about it on the regular podcast this week that, sometimes bike races are won with the head and with skill. And that was certainly the case here. And it's interesting because Vos has gone close this year, and we saw back at the Women's Tour where she narrowly lost to Con Rivera, where Rivera chose a better line. Here, Vos played an absolute blinder.
And it's brilliant to see, given everything that she has achieved. We saw, it was at the Women's Tour, wasn't it, when she was really upset afterwards and crying after losing out. And that really struck me at the time, because I probably foolishly, I've never been a professional athlete. I didn't realise to what extent those wins would still matter so much, and she would so desperately want to get those wins. And that's why I personally was so chuffed for her whenever she won.
And
they like winning.
What was also impressive about that was that she actually came off her bike. She went down a ditch.
Yeah. It was a rather genteel crash, wasn't it? They sort of flopped into the ferns.
I said this on Twitter though. I love the fact that was the thing she tweeted the next day. Not the manoeuvre at the end to win the race. It was this sort of comical moment where she came off her bike, and obviously it was on a hill, and she went running into the undergrowth, and she made some comment about when in a beautiful country like Sweden, why not go and explore the landscape. So quite amusing. And as you say, Orla, it is refreshing that somebody who's won as much as she has still has that same desire and satisfaction when she does win. At the European Championships, we were talking about this a bit before we start recording. It was a bit of a shambolic show from the Dutch team. And Rose, you made the point, which I hadn't really properly considered, that there were no race radios, and wonder whether that had something to do with the fact that they had Anna van der Breggen up the road with Elisa Longo Borghini. You would fancy her to win in a sprint, as you know she did in Rio, when the two of them were in that break. But she wasn't really fully committed to that, and at the same time, some of her Dutch teammates were kind of chasing behind as well.
Yeah, it was bizarre because from the outset you would have said the Dutch team is by far the strongest. I mean, you see them and they're all top world tour riders, all could probably win races in their own right. And then, yeah, you get out on the road and then you have teammates attacking a break with possibly the strongest rider in it of their own team. So it was really strange. But yeah, I think it was down to not having race radios, and all of the races that women do have race radios, and maybe people become, I don't know whether they become dependent on it, or you have to make a split-second decision, don't you, if you don't have someone assessing what's going on and being able to give you a bit of guidance.
Yeah, it looked like they were, confused and not knowing really what they should be doing. And it's difficult when you've got so many riders capable of winning, because you've got too many options. There isn't a clear focus for the team. And you've got Voss, who eventually came second, so she went close to winning. And, had she won, you might have said, well, that was the right tactic. The margins are pretty small.
And I know this is a news roundup and not a preview, but I think that can go either way looking ahead to the World Championships, because everyone will be eyeing up the Dutch. I mean, they should really be the ones to beat. And now from this, they'll go one of two ways, really. Either that will give everyone else a little bit of hope and think, well, actually, like you've just said, they've got too many winners. They don't know which card to play because they have so many options. Then it becomes difficult to commit. At what stage in the race do you commit to one rider or another? Or it will galvanise them and make them realise we need to get our plan together. We need to have a little bit more of a set strategy going into this and stick to it, rather than letting it play out in the road, which maybe it sometimes does.
I wonder also that being in Glasgow, when they're not in their trade teams, they're in their national teams, perhaps there isn't a natural strategy to fall back on. When you're in the trade team and all year you're racing, when this is the situation, we let this person go. When this is the situation, we attack.
And an unfamiliar race. There isn't a blueprint. Other races
exactly right,
they, whether it be Vargarda or other races on the calendar, they know the courses, they know where the races are won, etc. And that's the great thing about these one-day championship events, World Championships as well, that there's no blueprint. So it's nobody really knows the best way to ride the race. Well, one of the protagonists of the women's road race at the European Championships I mentioned earlier was 19-year-old Sophie Wright, who was out on her own for a long, long time. And seemed to be really enjoying it. Now, she has a quite incredible story. She's had 2 rounds of heart surgery. She's come back from that. Her attitude's amazing, and I spoke to her after the race. She's joined as well Cervelo Bigla now, and she will make her debut for them at Plouay coming up soon. So a big move for her, a big prospect that she is, and here she is, Sophie Wright.
It was just so good, and the crowds and the support from the spectators was just amazing, and it just really kept me going, especially kind of towards the end. I was just really enjoying it more than anything. I think with about 1.5 or 2 laps to go, the peloton did catch me, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to go with attacks now after being out on my own for so long. So by that point, I thought, well, I've done my job for GB. I've been out there, I've had a great time, so I'm just going to kind of stick in the race and use this last lap or so to just kind of lap it up and just enjoy the crowds and support and the whole moment. The majority of my races in the past have been mountain biking and cyclocross, really. So, and obviously you're on your own in those races. So 2018 has been my first kind of full road season for nationals anyway. I have still been doing mountain bike and cross though, but I'm just kind of beginning to get used to being in the peloton now. In all my previous races, like in 2017 and stuff, I always used to stick to the outside of the peloton. I never really liked being in the middle, and I still don't really like it, and I don't really think many people do. So for me, it was really good to kind of attack, see what happened, and then it was good being out on my own because I could choose my own lines. I was safe, and I did always have a chance of winning it, but it was quite unlikely. The crowds, the support was just so cool, and I think the front car, the man in the front car, he was going along in front of me, telling the crowds a bit about me. So when I then came through past the crowds, they all knew like my name, so they were just shouting my name, and I was thinking, like, how do all these people know my name? And and like when I was coming up the finish straight, because I got dropped from the main group when the attack started happening on the last lap, so there was just a group of me and about 12 others, but I attacked that group, and I was coming up the start finish straight on the last lap on my own, and it was just so amazing, kind of going all those 300 meters, just like almost being deafened by the crowd and the support, and it was almost like a bit emotional, really, knowing all these people are kind of shouting for me. Mountain bike was definitely my first love, really, because I remember from a family holiday in Scotland, we hired some bikes, and then immediately when I got home, I bought myself one, and me and Dad just used to go for kind of fun rides together. And then I actually started doing some road racing, but on my mountain bike, and I was winning those, and then that's kind of when I thought, oh, maybe I should buy a road bike. I originally started cross-country running, then got into triathlon, and then it was from the triathlon that cycling was my best and most enjoyable discipline. But like I've had more titles on the off-road scene, like European mountain bike champion and national mountain bike and cyclocross champion. But the road this year, because I've won the British Series with still one round to go, but I think for me the road this year has really kind of I've just really enjoyed it. And I went out to Mallorca in March, just after I left the British cycling programme, and that was brilliant. It gave me lots of kind of opportunities and just to experience a different type of riding, and I love the roads out there. And obviously winning the National Road Series has just been brilliant as well. And I think the turning point for me really was I did the World Cup, the World Mountain Bike Cup in Val di Sole in Italy, and I turned up there like 2 days before the race, having not ridden my mountain bike for about a month before that. And it's not really surprising really that on the first lap I ended up going over the bars, smashing my helmet, and from that point because my dad was there, I just kind of said to him, like, I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore, because I just can't expect myself to turn up to a mountain bike race without doing any mountain biking, especially on the World Cup scene anyway. So I think that was quite a significant turning point. So now that I've joined this amazing team, Servais Knaven, that's just given me so many opportunities really for the next 2 years, because it's a 2-year contract. I was watching some racing. I saw they got 3rd and 4th at La Course, and I thought, that looks like a really good team, very professional. They do the big races. They've got some big names in their team, and they get really good results. So I thought it was a bit of a long shot really, but I did contact them, and I did get a reply from Thomas. We had a conversation, and I kind of told him a bit more about myself. He told me the whole mentality about the team, and just from the first conversation with him, I knew that team is exactly what I was looking for. They had the exact mentality that I like. Like he said, all their riders want to be the best. They don't do every race, but they do the biggest, most important races, and they go there to win. And and that's just exactly what I like. And I think it's like a small team, but small and good. It's my first professional contract, and it is a commitment for the next 2 years, so I did have to be sure. And I had offers from 2 other quite big teams as well, but Servais Knaven was definitely the one that I wanted to be with. Yeah, so it was basically an issue with my heart where it was quite random. I'd just be kind of cycling along, and then I wouldn't even be pushing it. It would just be quite steady, and then suddenly my heart rate would go from, say, 140 beats per minute to 256 beats a minute, which obviously isn't normal. That kind of started in about 2014. When it happened, I'd just be out on my bike, and I would just used to kind of stop, and it would suddenly go back down within about 10 or 20 seconds, and then I'd just carry on riding again. But it was when it happened at the European Road Race Championships in 2016, where I actually finished third in the junior category. It was that race where I actually just continued cycling through it, and my heart rate averaged about 225 beats a minute for about over 20 minutes. So it was from that point that we knew that, like, this was serious actually, and we had to do something about it. I was originally kind of on the NHS, so they gave me a heart rate monitor to wear, but unfortunately it didn't happen when I was wearing it, so we had to give it back to them. And basically if it happened again, I'd just have to go back to the GP. So it was a constant, it wasn't really getting anywhere. But it was actually thanks to British Cycling, who got me a private consultation when I was on the programme with this doctor in Papworth Hospital in Cambridge. And yeah, from then it happened quite quickly, and I had my first heart operation, which was called an ablation, which is where they burn out some part of the heart which is causing the switch to flick, as it were. That was in January 2017, but unfortunately the operation didn't go as planned because the issue was in a more complicated place in the heart than they had prepared for, so they didn't have all of the equipment to deal with it. So I had to so that was like a 5-hour heart surgery thing, and then I had to go back again in April, hoping that it would work. Really, it was quite nerve-wracking, but I just had to roll with it, and there was a chance that I would end up with a pacemaker if they got it wrong, because they were working within millimeters within my heart. But luckily it went to plan, and I was in the operating theatre having keyhole surgery for about 5.5 hours. When the doctor said they'd done it, I just me and my family just cried, and it was just such a relief. Looking back at it, it is actually scarier looking back at it, because at the time I was in the middle of doing my A-levels, so I was pretty occupied. I just brought revision to me to the hospital, and I guess I didn't have the time to think about it. But now that I'm a full-time cyclist, I've kind of got more time to think about things, and what I went through was pretty big. I remember talking to my sister about it, and she was like, "God, Soph, I don't think you realise what you've been through." So to think that if they did get it wrong, my cycling career would have been over. So I was given local anaesthetic. So to be honest, I was a bit my brain was a bit all over the place. They didn't fully knock me out. So I found it quite interesting actually, looking at the wires going up through my veins from my groin to my heart. It's quite interesting. But when he told me, I think I might have asked him as I was being pushed in the hospital bed towards my parents, and he said they'd done it, and it was just such a relief. And I was I just cried, and my mum and dad were crying, because it was this issue that we'd had kind of hanging over us for 3 years or so. And the first operation didn't go to plan, so this was the second one, and if it didn't go to plan, I didn't even want to think about not doing cycling again.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, Cycling Podcast Team Car at the back of the pack, please.
The voice of Seb Piquet from Tour de France Race Radio. They're reminding me to tell you that this month's episode of the Cycling Podcast Féminin is sponsored by The Economist magazine. The Economist is about far more than just economics and finance. It covers a range of subjects from politics and business to science, technology, arts and the environment. The Economist helps readers prepare for what is going on in the world around them, And in today's dynamic world, facts matter more than ever. For over 170 years, The Economist has delivered trustworthy intelligence that helps people like you choose where to stand on the issues that matter most. People like you, Orla. I asked you to pick out an article this month that caught your eye. What have you found?
Yeah, there's a really interesting comment piece, really, on Latin America and how it's embraced quotas for female political candidates. And it says that maybe despite its macho reputation, or possibly because of it, Latin America is unusually keen on quotas for female political candidates, which I didn't realise. It says in 1991, Argentina became the world's first country to require parties to nominate women in a minimum fraction of races. Today, of the 18 Spanish or Portuguese speaking countries in the Americas, 17 have a version of this policy. I mean, it's interesting because then it explores the pros and cons, really, because critics will say that it deprives voters of a free choice of candidates, or others worry that the women elected are likely to be less qualified or puppets, really, of their male relatives. But they quote someone from the Occidental College in Los Angeles saying that most studies show that women are as accomplished as men, and then they put as a bit of an aside how low that bar can be in some places. But the question is, well, I mean, we're not going to say that all male politicians are necessarily the best people to be running countries, are we? But the question then is whether it improves the lives of women, and it's not conclusive on that. But they say that in the 12 years to 2009, female lawmakers in Mexico were 6 times more likely than their male counterparts to introduce bills invoking women's rights or children's well-being. But a study of Argentina found that the share of female-friendly bills actually fell as more women entered Congress. So it's just that really interesting dynamic and concept, really, of female quotas in general, really, whether they work, whether they're a good thing, but certainly in Latin America, that's the way they're doing it.
Thank you, Orla. That was interesting. The Economist is a smart guide to the forces changing your world. So to get your free print copy of The Economist, text BIKES, that's BIKES, to 78070. That's text BIKES to 78070 to get your free print copy of The Economist magazine. Well, before the break there, we heard from Sophie Wright, the young British rider who will soon make her debut for Cervelo Bigla, and obviously a great prospect. And I mean, I found her just fascinating, and what she's been through is amazing, and certainly her attitude's great. So good luck to her. Now, the Tour de France recently, I spoke to David Lappartient, the UCI president, about what he plans to do to help develop women's cycling, which was a point he made repeatedly in his campaign to be elected president, that he was going to help women's cycling. I was speaking to him before La Course, so we didn't talk about that. I was also speaking to him before the routes for the Tokyo Olympic road races were announced, and there's a big difference between the men's and the women's. We'll talk about that after we've heard from Lappartient. But here's what he had to say. What would be your priorities for helping to develop women's cycling?
We have, I would say, plenty of things to deliver in this. There is not only one point. The first one is really to ensure, I would say, a better economy of women's cycling. You know, the level of the salary is so poor for the women's cycling. I want to bring more stability for the riders themselves, just to ensure that they can earn their life with cycling, that they can have a social protection, that they can have strong teams, a good environment, no harassment, all these kind of things. This is very important. The second point is really to ensure so that we have a best media coverage, and specifically TV, because that's so important. We have beautiful women's races. I don't know if you remember last year, the World Championship. The women's race was probably more interesting than the men's race. So we can have wonderful races, and this is why we are building a sort of new World Tour, but we will increase the specification to be part of the World Tour, to have live TV coverage. We need also to have one big stage races, also some more stage races at the highest level with the top coverage. I would say like the Tour de France. The men, they have the Tour de France. The women, they don't have a really worldwide event. They have some beautiful races, the Giro for ladies, the Tour of Britain. Of course, that's probably the 2 best one. But I'm sure also ISO can be involved in this. That's, I think, important to do this. We need also Paris-Roubaix for ladies. We need all this. So I spoke with them. I spoke with the stakeholders. We also took the decision to have complete parity in all the prize money in the UCI events. That will be the case also in cyclocross. So in 2021 it will be the case. So in every year the gap will close, and then we'll have a complete parity in the prize money, and we will increase also on the road the prize money. The gap is very important. If we want to put the same today, we will kill the women races. So this is not what we want, and we are really working on building a new world tour, and to organize a world tour, ladies world tour, it's a bit like the same frame of the men. So we are on the right way, but we are starting, with 140 years of history behind the men's cycling.
You mentioned ASO. They're obviously the biggest promoter, organizer of cycling events. Could they be doing more, do you think, to promote women's cycling and to put on more women's events?
I'm sure, and they have to. And I spoke clearly with them on this, because they are doing this race by Le Tour. It's good, but I think it's not enough. That's why I think they must organize maybe Paris-Roubaix for ladies, a 1 week stage race. That's something we need to have to really promote women's cycling. And we have some strong women, and it's very important that everybody can, and the strong stakeholders can also support women's cycling.
There's reports of rumours of the team time trial next year at the World Championships being mixed gender. Is that going to happen? Is that something you would like to see happen next year?
I will not comment on this for the moment, and we have a management committee of UCI and the Congress, and what is sure is that we decided to stop with the team time trial by trademark, and we will discuss with the colleagues of the management committee on this.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, brought to you by Skoda. Dedicated to closing the gender gap in cycling, one race, one cyclist at a time. This is our time.
So that was David Lappartient, still quite new in office. He's been making a lot of headlines for comments that he's been making, mainly about Team Sky and Chris Froome and Dave Brailsford and so on. But what did you make of that, Orla? He is a politician, and he sounds a bit like a politician. But a couple of concrete things he said there. He did make the case for women's Paris-Roubaix and a week-long stage race organised by ASO, which is the first I'd heard of that suggestion. Now, it is assumed, partly because he's French and because he's deeply involved with the French Federation, that he has a good relationship with ASO. He was certainly very present at the Tour de France, and not all UCI presidents of recent years have been. So the assumption is that he's got a good relationship with ASO, and that he might have their ear and be able to help these things, or help to make these things happen.
I think he needs the scruff of the neck of ASO more than anything else, because that's what they need to be taken by to do anything. I'm being unfair. I'm being very unfair, because they do organise, high calibre women's races, but for me, they don't do enough. A women's French stage race. He didn't say French, but the whole talk has been about a Tour de France. Yeah, great. Paris-Roubaix, I think, would be very exciting. But it just needs so much more than that, and I think it needs so much deeper than that. They're great headlines, and they're great things that for anyone who doesn't maybe know an awful lot about women's cycling would say, okay, that's a great box to tick, that looks like it's really good. But for me, the devil is in the detail, and he did mention better TV coverage, and it seemed to me that he was saying that women's World Tour races will need to commit more to television coverage in the future. That to me is the absolute fundamental underlying key to all of it, and I think that women's World Tour races should not be women's World Tour races unless they do a better job of streaming, of broadcasting the races, and of supporting the races. And he talked about better salary for women, more stability. They're all great. No one's going to argue against that. But how? I want to... The first part of that interview, I was thinking, okay, well, give me detail. Tell me how that's going to happen. And I didn't really get much of that. So the concrete things that he said were all the accessible things. So yes, a stage race, because there has been an argument for a women's Tour de France. Paris-Roubaix, again, lots of people were tweeting around Paris-Roubaix to say, when will there be a women's Paris-Roubaix? But it's not having these races that matters. It's how they're staged, it's how they're organised, and it's how they're promoted. And that has been my argument really with ASO, has been that some of the races have been incredibly well organised and promoted. So you look at the Women's Tour de Yorkshire, for example. But, my bugbear with that is that it should be on a weekend. It should be, what is the best thing for women's racing? How can we get the best exposure? Not, how can we keep people happy for a little bit? And he also said about, building the Women's World Tour and making it a similar framework to the Men's World Tour. Why? because it's broken. We don't need to be copying men's racing, and that is where we've got such an advantage with women's racing, because it doesn't have, as he says, 140 years of history. It doesn't have that baggage. It doesn't have the burdens that men's racing does. Let's do something fresh and different. And like I say, think about what is the best thing for women's racing, not how do we keep Twitter happy.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I think. As soon as he started saying, there's lots of different things that we need to do, I kind of couldn't help but roll my eyes, because this whole thing about, you need a bit more stability. Kind of the men's cycling doesn't have stability. So in what way can we achieve that in women's cycling when there's actually less money going around to make things stable? So yeah, it would be nice to have. I mean, obviously, it was just a quick interview at the Tour de France. It's not like
don't blame the interview.
I saw it being done, so I know it was just between coffees and newspaper. No, it was just in the village being done. But
listen, I grabbed him in the village, and you've not got time to go into the detail.
Well,
but
no, exactly,
you need a proper sit-down interview, and maybe, Orla, we're going to the World Championships in Innsbruck. Maybe we'll have a chance there to sit him down and speak to him in the sort of detail, because he was speaking to lots of journalists for 5 minutes at a time, and he was very good at that. You can hear that he's quite slick. He's the kind of guy, you ask him, you hit him a softball, and he can keep going for several minutes without actually saying very much at all.
Because this is the thing. I mean, you said at the start he's still relatively new to the job. He's not really, because
in terms of a
presidential term, and the reality is that he may just last for one term.
Yeah, but it takes time, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. But an awareness of the shortness of time means that you've got to get concrete things off the ground very quickly, start to do things, start to put things in place. And that's what I don't think we've seen yet. If he's done things behind the scenes to oblige Women's World Tour races to have more television coverage, fine. If he's in talks, concrete, advanced talks with or even medium stage talks with ASO about a Women's Tour de France, whether you agree with that or not, I mean, that's a separate issue, or about a Women's Paris-Roubaix, fine. But at the minute, it sounds to me like just ideas, which is what you campaign off. That's what he was doing this time last year. He was talking about ideas. Where have we gone with it?
I don't think it's even. It's not even as fully formed as ideas necessarily, isn't it? It's kind of wishful thinking in the wishful thinking stage. But it's different. I mean, what more are we expecting? Obviously, for him to
how much power does he have as well? I mean, more perhaps with women's cycling than with men's cycling to reshape that, but perhaps not with ASO. I mean, the UCI and ASO are very unequal bedfellows, really. So can we just move on to the sorry, Rose just got a bit frightened by a pigeon. Sorry. Can we just move on to the Tokyo road race courses, because these were announced for the Olympic Games in 2020, and the bare facts are that the women will race 137 kilometres with 2,692 metres of elevation gain over 2 climbs. The men will race 234 kilometres with 4,865 metres of elevation gain. There's also a big difference in the number of riders riding each. The women's field is very limited indeed. 76 riders?
I think it's 67.
So it's a very small field. Obviously, there was a huge reaction to this. The Twitter warriors went to battle, but also people like Annemiek van Vleuten, Marianne Vos, Audrey Cordon-Ragot, all very critical of the difference between the two races. Cycling News did a big feature this week on it with a bit more considered reaction, including from the UCI and their rationale behind it. And it's quite interesting. I mean, it's far more measured than a lot of the reaction on Twitter, as you'd expect. But the most interesting voice in this debate is Gracie Elvin, the Michelin Scott rider, who we had on earlier this year talking about the Cyclist Alliance, which she's helped form. And what she said I thought was really interesting. And whether you agree with her or not, I thought the stance she took was very refreshing. She said, we need to figure out as a whole, with all stakeholders and not just one group, federation or union, what gender equality looks like. Is the end goal equal distances? In my personal opinion, I would say no. She also says of the course in Tokyo, the Japanese are renowned for their effort, consideration and attention to detail, and I don't believe the Olympics will be an exception. I think these will be one of the best games in history, and I think they've chosen the road race courses to challenge the riders as well as showcase the area. I would be surprised if it was anything less than spectacular for viewers, and I think the Twitter warriors have been very disrespectful in their quick assumptions and criticisms. And another point she kind of makes is that in Rio, it was a very hilly, challenging course. In Tokyo, it's actually still a very hilly, challenging course. But should it always be a hilly and challenging course? Because that only favours one type of rider. And there are other riders who might never have the chance of going for Olympic gold medal simply because the courses never suit them.
It wasn't particularly hilly in London. I mean,
No.
a lot of it was made
it
of Box
wasn't.
Hill, but
Rio was.
Rio was, yeah, and going up.
No,
the climb to Vista
London
Chennaoui
was. London was not.
It's either going to be hilly or
but there was no
not,
fuss
really,
about
isn't
that
it?
because it's always about the comparison with the men's. That's the problem here. The race is not being looked at in isolation. The race is only being looked at relative to the men's race. And is that right? And I thought Gracie Alvin's view on this was really refreshing because she's looking at this race in isolation on its own merits. Will it make for a good race? It may well do.
I think that the World Championships and the Olympic road race are the only examples whereby we should be comparing the men's and the women's courses. Ordinarily, we should look at them separately. We should.
Why?
Yeah. Because that is when you have a more general audience. And the World Championships, not even so much. It's really cycling fans who watch that. The Olympic road races are often the only time that general sports fans, we do it all the time, whereby we're suddenly huge swimming fans, or we're suddenly huge marathon fans, whatever. We only watch it once every 4 years. That is the showcase to the wider sporting world as to what exactly can be done. And I think that you need a course in an Olympics that looks similar to the men, because it is as simple as that. It's a shop window. If you look at the Rio race, for example, people who are not following cycling for the rest of that 4-year cycle, they saw the men go up that climb to Vista Chennaoui and what turned out to be quite a treacherous descent back into Copacabana, and they saw the women do exactly the same thing. And it's very, very simplified, but if you're watching from home, you think, they can do the same thing, in the same way that you watch non-athletics fans will watch the men and the women's marathon and think, well, they've got the same physiological ability, they can both do the same thing. I think in Tokyo, without going up Mount Fuji, it looks like an inferior course. And while we should be looking at the course and how it challenges the women's peloton, that should matter more than anything else. How the course looks does matter, I think, in the Olympic Games more than, well, probably, yeah, the only example.
But what
really
if the women's race is a better race on the day? I mean,
well,
what if it's a better race?
It often is. It often is.
Yeah, it's difficult with the course that they've picked for it to. I mean, it'll still be a good race, but this whole kind of. I always think with the local circuits at the end of any race. I mean, I always think when I see one in the road book, I think, well, it's not going to be such an interesting end, but at least I'll get to the press buffet a bit earlier, you know. So I think it is a real shame to not have. I think it's the fact that the bit that is selected is not the bit with the iconic kind of Mount Fuji bit. That yeah, it's difficult because also I think perhaps the issue is the issue not more that why is there not harder, well, more climbing races across the whole of the women's calendar for because there's not loads of pure climbers.
It's funny though, isn't it? We were quite sceptical, I think, of La Course before La Course was run this year, and yet we all agreed it was a fantastic race. You know, it was very short. They didn't do all the climbs that the men did, but it served up a brilliant race, and maybe it was just the right length, and maybe it had just the right number of climbs.
I don't disagree with that, but I think for me, the fact that it omits the iconic Mount Fuji, which is internationally known, that's the problem with it. And, you know, to use a very podcast term, yes, that makes it would make it very climby, but, you know, courses are either climby or they're not generally. And so for the following Olympic Games, it could be a course for the sprinters. We can't really complain then that it's a course for the sprinters. It's not so much the amount of climbing or how tough the course is, really. I'm just boiling it down to the very, you know, the lowest common denominator, which is how it looks. And I really do think that matters in the Olympics, because it's often our frame of reference, you know, whenever people are talking about the difference between men's and women's racing and how exciting it is compared to men's racing. You know, we do refer to the London Road Race, which was much more dynamic, the Olympic Games. We do refer to Rio, which was incredibly exciting. And I just think it's that one handy comparison where actually you can look and see what women can do over a similar course, and how much more dynamic that racing is, and make a very simple argument for how wonderful the sport is off the back of it.
Changing topic. Also at the Tour de France, I bumped into Kasia Niewiadoma, the Canyon SRAM rider.
Fancy that.
Well,
a bike race.
Yeah, she was on holiday, and she is the girlfriend of Taylor Finney. And she was following him around the tour. She was there for a lot of it. She was mainly with Taylor Finney's sister. But one morning, I thought I'd grab a quick word with her. Here's what she had to say. How are you enjoying the tour? I've seen you here you've been around a few days.
Yeah, I'm staying here till Paris. Actually, I want to follow the race till the end. And yeah, I really enjoy it. It's something different. It's nice to be riding in new places, like from point one to B, instead of just being in Girona and all the time riding on the same roads. And of course it's super nice to see my boyfriend here racing, and yeah, it kind of feels emotional for me to support him and just be here with his friends and sister. So we are having a really nice crew, and yeah.
So are you taking a little break from racing as well now?
Yeah, after Giro and La Course I took a week off, and now I'm back on the bike, but just I want to do it slowly and with a pleasure of riding my bike. And especially here it's so beautiful. And today, yeah, I want to go into the mountains to discover, to explore this place. And yeah, it's, all about the people and having fun at the end of the day, because sometimes while you are just training and racing, you forget about the beauty of the sport. And this is kind of like my little reminder. Of course, it kind of cost me a little bit more energy because I can't recover as good as when I'm training at home. But my head is completely happy. Yeah, exactly.
So what's the next race for you? And what the second part of the season, the World Road Race, is that a course you think might suit you, or what are your big goals for the rest of the season?
That's the thing that ever since I'm back in Girona, my mind's gonna be completely set on World Championships race. I want to prepare as good as it's only possible, and I still have a lot of time actually. To make a proper trainings and just to visualize the race and be like sure, okay, I'm well prepared and not surprised that, oh my goodness, I'm lacking power on these long climbs. And yeah, I only have a few more races actually: Tour of Norway, Ploé, Ardèche and Worlds. So I really love this because it gives me ease in my mind to just prepare and focus on my goal.
Have you been to see the course?
I'm gonna go in the middle of August.
But you've heard, obviously, it's very, very hard.
I heard and I checked the profiles and the videos, and of course it's brutal.
Who do you think is the favourite? I mean, Annemiek van Vleuten obviously has been very strong, Anna van der Breggen as well.
And as Ashim Mulman-Pasho as well. Yeah, this is the thing, that with this race, and also World Championships are always a kind of weird race, and
maybe Dutch infighting could help other riders.
That's what I mean, because Anna and Annemiek, they are from Holland, and it's impossible that both of them will win. So maybe we can, get advantage out of it.
The Cycling Podcast Féminin is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport, fueled by science.
Thank you very much to Science in Sport for supporting the Cycling Podcast Féminin. You can get 25% off your Science in Sport products at scienceinsport.com with the code SISCP25. That's SISCP25 for all your Science in Sport products. And we will hear later in this episode about a ride in which you might want to use some of your Science in Sport products, but that's coming up a bit later on with Cycling Podcast Féminin listener Hannah Nicklin. In the meantime, bit of news about teams. You touched on this in your news roundup, Orla. Wiggle High 5 are going to be no more. Quite an extraordinary announcement by Rochelle Gilmore, a film.
I think just to talk about it, we should all head down to the Lido and drape ourselves on the edges.
Well, I mean, it's worth watching if you've somehow missed it. But she was dressed in a white dress. She was at the lighthouse in Mallorca, the lighthouse at Formentor. Yeah, she was there. She was on the rocks, and she made this announcement that the team was going to fold at the end of the year. Strange, wasn't it?
I don't know.
It struck an odd tone.
You just throw it out there and we have to pick it up.
It was a strange announcement, a strange way to announce the end of a team.
Yes. Very odd. I mean, especially considering all the people who essentially made redundant all the riders, all the stuff. Well, she listed how many staff were. She
listed
being made redundant,
the vehicles, the bikes, and it was there were quite extraordinary numbers as well involved in running the team, and yeah, all very odd. And I think there's more to come from that. There's obviously riders who are on the market. Elisa Longo-Borghini strongly rumoured to be going to Trek. Audrey Cordon-Ragot as well, possibly. But there are other riders like Kirsten Ville joined this year, Lisa Brenner as well, Katie Archibald. There are a lot of highly sought after riders who will now be available.
I think what was odd about it really was the juxtaposition between the visuals and the months of rumours behind the scenes of lack of organisation, maybe financial problems, trouble at the team basically. Certainly there have been articles written, we've heard different things about maybe not everything being entirely rosy on the team, and I think that's what made the manner of the announcement slightly bizarre, because you wouldn't expect there to be any reflection of that, but it was a very, very rosy picture that was painted of the team's achievements and looking back on the halcyon days of the squad, rather than the quite brutal reality of the team now folding and all of those people, as you say, being out of a job and riders trying to find contracts in a difficult market.
It's difficult as well because they have a lot of track riders, really excellent track riders, and there aren't many teams that are road teams that are willing to take on a track rider knowing that their focus going to be elsewhere, especially with the Olympics kind of looming. So I don't know, it's going to be tough for a lot of it, and they've got quite a big squad as well.
We talk a lot, I suppose from the start of this podcast it's been about recognising that women's cycling is developing and growing, and there's this momentum behind it, but that progress isn't linear, is it? There are things that happen like this where, on the one hand you've got the new Trek factory racing team setting up, but on the other hand here's a big high profile team, one of the original kind of standalone women's professional teams, a real trailblazer in a lot of ways, folding, and also on the one hand got Trek team setting up, but that puts into some doubt the future of the Trek Drops team, which is a team that we followed from the start. So swings and roundabouts, and it's the picture is not entirely rosy. There are some clouds there as well.
Yeah, and we're at a funny time really, aren't we? Because we do have the new Trek team coming in. Movistar have started this year. Some of the women's versions of men teams are now fairly well established. Mitchelton Scott, who've done a brilliant job. But it is a bit sad really to see the standalone teams struggling, because as you say, Wiggle High Five, they were trailblazers. They've done wonderful things over the years, and I've loved what they've stood for, and the fact that they have done it in a woman's way, in terms of women's racing, and not necessarily trying to ape or bring on board philosophies, mentalities, practices of the men's side of things. And the same with Trek Drops, who started with a very, I think, unconventional and transparent aim of being entirely amateur, but wanting to be the most professional amateur team in the peloton, and then becoming gradually professional. I think what they've done has been so refreshing. And yet at the other end, we now have the big money teams coming in who've been well established in the men's peloton and transposing that onto women's racing. That will be very interesting to see. I would rather see it cohabit with the independent women's teams, so that we do have a very distinct flavour to women's racing, because we talk about that a lot, and I think how important that is to be able to grow the sport organically rather than aping anything that the men's team have done, but the men's teams have done rather. But I think we're at a very interesting time really in the development of women's cycling because of these big sponsors coming in.
Well, a team at a lower level is a team that Servais Knaven, the sports director at Team Sky, is involved with, mainly because he's got daughters who are racing cyclists. So I grabbed a word with him at the Tour de France as well about that team and about his hopes for developing that team, his hopes for his daughters, whether Team Sky might launch a women's team. Not sure about that. Here he is, Servais Knaven.
Yeah, so I have 4 daughters. The eldest is almost 18, so she's junior. And the other 3 are like every time 2 years younger, so the youngest is 11. My daughter competed today at the European Championships time trial in Czech Republic. Was 9th on the time trial, and because they do cycling, I also see things that could be better for women's cycling. And that's when I got the idea to build something up with a junior team, which we started this year. team has 6 girls, and 4 of them are competing at the Europeans this week. So I think we already improved, get some nice things out of it. And I really see there's a big gap between the juniors and the UCI women team. That gap is huge, and there's not really like a platform for those girls where they really can develop. And that's the reason why I started with some good sponsors behind me, with some support of Team Sky. We started this team from the 1st of January.
So what's the team called, and do you have ambitions to develop it, maybe as your daughter gets older, into a development team and then maybe a professional team?
Yeah, of course the plan is the junior team is the base. That's where we start, and next year we want to have another under 23 team. So where most girls who are in the junior team right now, they will be elite next year, and the plan is to have them in that team next year. And of course we keep the junior team where we will always have the young talents, mainly from Holland now. But the under 23 team, we really want to make this a bit more international team in the future. So all the girls, and then we don't not only look at results, we really look at the abilities and capabilities of the girls. And sometimes the best girls don't get results yet, and we really want to develop them to make the next step, and hopefully they can be part of a UCI World team in the future.
Do you get the chance, you're busy obviously with Team Sky, but do you get the chance to go to many races with them and help out?
No, not many. I've done a few races this year, but then I was not there as the big manager, because I'm there also as a father. But you help the girls out, you give them some advice, and you really see they're stepping up, and then they won both the national titles in time trial and the road race. And the most important, what I see, is that they really learn to ride as a team. I think that's one of the key things we want to learn them. Of course, we want them to win bike races, but if they make mistakes and lose, it's sometimes better. And one of the best things I saw on the national championships, it's always a special race. Everyone want to become national champion. And one of our girls won, and 3 others were in that breakaway, finished 8th, 9th and 10th, and they all 3 came over the line with hands in the air. That was like a real team win, and I think that's something really important to learn and ride as a team and get better. And we really want to learn them about how to work with the power meter and things like that.
Women's cycling is developing very quickly. We've heard this morning Trek Segafredo launching a women's team. Put any pressure on Dave Brailsford to launch a Team Sky women's team? That
would be nice if that comes out. I think it's already nice for us now, for the juniors, to have the support of the team. But we get some material, we got some helmets, we got some. The girls got some seminars from nutritionists and a physio. So all those small things is so important for them, and really nice that Team Sky is supporting them. They were one day in Tour of Flanders, the day after they rode with our guys towards the velodrome of Roubaix. All those things looks maybe small, but for girls of 17 years old it's huge, and to be a bit involved and see how a big team like Team Sky works.
Would you be happy for your daughter, and maybe other daughters as well, to have a career? There are professional female riders now. Would you be happy for them, and is that what they want to do, become professional riders themselves?
Of course, when they want to achieve that, I'm gonna support them. Another thing is they also go to school, and I think that's most important. But the combination is easy to make, I think, and if they end up to be a professional, and for sure I will 100% back them.
Yeah, great to hear from Servais, and he's doing amazing things for the junior women. I saw them I was actually in their team car at Gent-Wevelgem, the junior women's Gent-Wevelgem, and they rock up and they've got like Pinarello dogmas on their roof rack. And you think, whoa, this is not your normal junior women's team. But yeah, I was there because I was doing a feature with Servais Knaven, who is a former Paris-Roubaix champion, and also with Magnus Backstedt, who has his own team that was set up in a similar way for his daughters, who is also a former Paris-Roubaix champion. And it's amazing to see them getting involved and really taking a professional hand. And, when you have 2 champions like that, they raise the awareness of junior women's racing. I think they bring expertise that otherwise the junior women wouldn't get. And their teams really race like teams. That's kind of the distinct difference, I think, compared with the other junior teams that were out there.
And just talking about that transfer of experience from a successful racing career onto women's racing at any level, it made me think of Georgia Bronzini and her transfer now to the new Trek team as a director sportif, because I don't know if she's done yet or she's going to do this December, maybe the UCI director sportif course. But, you know, she's bringing so much racing experience to bear on that new team. And so when I'm talking about, you know, the men's teams being almost, you know, transposed over to the women's side of things, I think that hopefully will be slightly different. I mean, she's had 16 years, 80 wins on road and track, and it's great. It's just wonderful, her and Teudenberg, that their experience isn't being lost out there somewhere. That we now do actually have the possibility and the vehicle for that experience to then be used to bring the young riders through and future champions through. I think that's just a lovely sign of where the sport's at the moment, I think.
Well, we've been joined by Cycling Podcast and Cycling Podcast Féminin listener Hannah Nicklin. Hello, Hannah.
Hello. And friend. I'm friend.
And friend.
Oh,
right?
tick, tick, tick.
Yeah. Excellent. That's well, Hannah, you got in touch with us a couple of months ago after we mentioned the Rapha Women's 100, which is a sort of global ride on September the 15th. There are lots of rides happening all over the world. Mm-hmm. And you got in touch with us offering to organise one on behalf of the Cycling Podcast Féminin.
I did indeed. Organise is a loose term. I mean, I've mapped a route and I will make sure that I'm there and guide people and stuff. But it's not like super... I don't know, it's not super serious or anything.
But that's the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about bringing, I think, as far as I can see. I mean, my first ever 100k was done on a Rapha Women's 100. I just looked it up on the website about 4 years ago and followed some people to Margate and had fish and chips. It was a really rainy day there. It was a genuinely disgusting ride. But it was my first 100k, and I kind of hope that this could be that for a bunch of other people, also people who've ridden 100k loads of times and stuff. It's just about women coming together and riding together. Well,
that's interesting. What had been your experience before doing that, and how did you enjoy it?
My first ever 100k. My experience before that, so I was my first year in London, that's 5 years ago now, and I hadn't ridden more than 40k before I moved to London because I was doing triathlons, and I had never done more than like the 42-kilometre ride triathlon, so I'd never trained above that, and I just moved to London. When you move to London, you meet a lot of bike people quite quickly, actually, and the bike people, they got me out into the roads surrounding London and stuff. So actually the ride route that I've planned is a lot of my favourite roads that I've been riding for 5 years now, that hills that like once seemed like mountains are now like old friends kind of hills. So
well, tell us the route. So it's meeting in Crystal Palace. That's Sunday morning on the 15th.
That's right, yeah. It's a 9:15 meeting for a 9:30 leave. I've got a bunch of friends from local women's teams to come along and help guide it. So there's going to be people sort of looking after everyone on the back as well as the front. Heads out of Crystal Palace from a cafe called Cadence. Cadence
at the top of the hill, isn't it?
Yeah, top of Manley Hill. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to add any extra kilometres on, you can get the train to Crystal Palace Station, which is very accessible from like Victoria and London Bridge. So you can just sort of walk up the hill with your bike and then we'll roll down it.
You see a lot of that going up Manley Hill, actually. A lot of bike pushing. Yeah,
which is totally acceptable.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
Like, one thing I particularly want to say is that the whole ethos, particularly of this ride, some of the women's 100 rides are competitive or faster, but the ethos of this ride is that no one is left behind. At the top of every hill, we will wait. And I heard Daniel Freever complaining about the cafe stops. I was listening a couple of days ago to the podcast. The cafe stops are a very polite... I think he was not thinking like this because obviously he's very sexist.
Mic drop.
I think
it's all right. It's all right. He's so sexist he doesn't listen to Féminin, so we can say whatever we like.
But
joking, Danielle.
Joking. Very polite way of saying toilet break. They are places where there are toilets because not everyone wants to wee in a field, especially when there were 15 of you or something. So,
of course, because we did a whole thing, a water feature on this, the women's tour, and talking about how professional women stop for a wee. It's a big issue, actually.
And like I'm fine weeing in fields. Like that's a totally fine thing for me. I'm used to training lots and stuff, but like I know not everyone is. And I also know that there's a difference between like just stopping in the middle of nowhere on your own, stopping stopping with like 15 to 20 other women and all going into a field and having a wee together, which could be a lovely communal experience, but I just want to give people the option. So there are 2 cafe stops planned at 2 of my favourite cafes. One will be quite quick one, Ide Hill's, quite small cafes, probably not room enough for everyone to sit down, but you can get a really good Mars bar ice cream there. And then the other one,
our eyes met over that. Can tell what our favourite bit of the ride would be. Mars bar.
And then Lullingston Country Park Cafe, which do a really good scone. So
brilliant. So talk us through the actual route then. So you started on Annerley Hill,
so you
Crystal
start
Palace.
in Crystal Palace, heading out sort of via Lambs Road, if people know that kind of way. And that's just like
past West Wickham, isn't it?
Exactly. Past West Wickham, Lambs Road, and then hitting Bedlstead, which is the first climb, but it's not that hard. You go down a hill into it and then you can just find your rhythm. From Bedlstead onto Pilgrim's Lane, coming off Pilgrim's Lane towards Toys Hill, doing the easy side of Toys Hill. It's one of my favourite places to do like hill reps or like long draggy efforts because it's shaded, so in the summer it's really nice and cool up there. And then you make it to the top of Toys Hill, you get to go down a hill quite fast, and then you get to go up Ide Hill and have an ice cream at the top. And then from Ide Hill, sort of weaving around to up. So one of the great things about this bit of south of London is that there's huge post-glacial ridge, which basically means that after you go past a certain point, you're going to have to do some climbs. And it was a really good way of me just getting used to climbing. Before I was racing, it was something that I was always really afraid of. So like another thing that I really want women who come along to this ride to sort of learn is that you don't have to smash it up every hill. You can eventually, but you can also just put it in the lowest gear and spin up. So we're going to spin up the post-glacial ridge on probably not... I was originally going to send us up Rowdow or Rodo, I don't know how you pronounce it. But I think it's maybe a little bit sharp. So I found a kind of an easier climb up there, up to Ainsford, and then Lullingstone Cafe is on the way. And then pretty much just looping back round past, what's the RAF area called?
Biggin Hill?
Biggin Hill back to London, and then cadence back at the start.
I did not know there was a post-glacial ridge.
That's your hood. That's where you grew up.
I'm a South Londoner, born and bred. I can't believe it.
Well, you'll be riding up it before too long.
Down it. That's why there's that, there's actually a road called The Ridge as well on the post-glacial ridge, which is one of the key geological features of the south of London.
My goodness. And everyone just thinks it's all, stabbings and curry, but it's not.
And drill music, yeah. I'm absolutely gutted I can't ride it, actually, because a lot of those are my roads, my adopted roads. I'd love to be doing it. It sounds absolutely brilliant. What kind of a difference does it make then being women only, do you think, as an experience for someone who's either done mixed rides or is a bit nervous about doing anything of this distance? What difference does it make if it's women only?
I don't really want to fall into the stereotypes of it's not as competitive, because it depends who you ride with.
Absolutely.
And no one's going to half wheel you, because again, it depends who you ride with. But I do think that specifically this context, the Women's 100, is about accessibility, and everyone who's sort of helping me with the ride are really experienced women. So I think the context of this particular ride will be being able to chat to people who race at a national level in the UK, hearing from us that we don't really like going up hills that fast most of the time, and making those connections in case you wanted to get into racing, in case you wanted to find people to ride with who experience exactly the same physiological challenges as you do, which I think is just slightly different. There's a level of solidarity that you can get with women that you can't get in the same way with men, I think, just because we face different physiologies on the bike.
And how important for you personally coming to London was making friends in the cycling community? How important has that been?
I was actually thinking about this last night, because I'm actually leaving London fairly soon, in a couple of months, or rather, actually 6 weeks. And this is also sort of a farewell ride to me, to some of my favourite roads that I've known really well over the past few years. And I was thinking, I was writing in my head my goodbye speech, because I just planned my party yesterday, and I was like, I need to say something. What do I say? And I was thinking about all the different groups of friends that I have, and in particular, the gift of the women who race in my life. the version of femininity that they have brought to my life. A lot of them are like slightly older than me in the team that I race with, and it's a kind of being a woman completely without the context of men, which is just really powerful. And the strength and the tenacity and the grit and the falling down and losing half your skin and getting up again and doing it anyway kind of attitude, which, pushing yourself for no reason except being better in your own context, not for anyone else, which I find really, really powerful. So that, I think, has been one of the biggest things I've
Well, join Hannah on her farewell ride. The Cycling Podcast Féminin Rapha Women's 100 on September the 15th. You can sign up at rapha.cc, and there's a page devoted to the Women's 100 rides, and scroll down almost to the bottom and you'll find the ride and you can register there.
Yeah, you can also look at the route, because I put my ride link, so you can download the GPX file if you have a Garmin. And
Orla and Rose will be there, am I right in thinking that? Orla will be there.
Yes, I'll be there anyway. I'll be waving everybody off.
In her high-vis jacket.
I think I'll be there.
Rose, you're going to try and be there as well.
Yeah, I'm going to.
You're going to try and ride it.
I can't
Excellent.
really not.
You're going to. You've just been put on the spot here. But you're going to be recording as well, so we'll get some audio from the day, and it'll feature in future podcasts. Before we go today, last month we heard from 3 riders who were doing the Ride London, the 100-mile ride, having barely ridden a bike before. They were sponsored by Skoda. They work at the Telegraph, and 2 of them did it. Bryony unfortunately had to pull out, but Alice and Boudica did it. And I went back into the Telegraph office to see them and hear about how it went. Here they are.
I'm Alice Vincent, and I'm an entertainment writer for the Telegraph.
I'm Boudica Fox-Leonard, and I'm a commission editor and writer for Weekend at the Telegraph.
Yeah, I was so terrified. I woke up very early, was very scared, spent quite a lot of time on the loo. It was horrible. I hated that first hour, but then the minute I got downstairs to the hotel lobby and I saw the other girls on the team, I was like, okay, I've got to do it.
I like to minimise the time from waking up to actually having to be present at the meeting point, so I didn't have very long to think about it all, but I managed to get down there and realise I'd misplaced a few of my entry number forms and stuff like that, and yeah, these guys had to sort of hold my hand a little bit. So Ride London was on the Sunday. I clipped in for the first time on the Wednesday before, my mate. So he was like, I'll just take you for a little ride. We went around Regent's Park, and then we cycled up to Swains Lane and back. And that, I think, is the sum total of all the training I did. Certainly in shoes, that was the first time I'd ever clipped in. And that was it.
Yeah, it was much the same. I was quite jealous of Boo's hill-based ride, actually, because I'd done a lot of commuting on the bike, but again, I'd only clipped in on the Wednesday. I'd had one commute in, and the thing I was most worried about is that I'd not done anything beyond about an hour in one fell swoop on the bike. So I'd never done anything 2 hours, 3 hours, let alone 7. And I got weirdly obsessed with fueling and food just beforehand, obsessed with it. But I realised that part of the problem with my training is that I hadn't actually eaten properly around it. So yeah, I always felt rubbish when I got off the bike. We kind of stuck in a clan until I'd say, until Richmond. And then I had my front wheel started to come off. And so I had to, my gears were slipping, and I was like, I better pop into the mechanic. And then I had to wait half an hour at the mechanic. That was very annoying. I lost everyone, had a very low kind of couple dozen miles until getting to Surrey Hills, really. And then around mile 40, things started picking up. Yeah, it was obviously very wet and very windy, and it's amazing how quickly you get used to that sideways rain, actually.
I would say the first 33 miles were the hardest bit for me in terms of how slow it felt to get to that number. And then the middle chunk for me was just loads of waiting and queuing and ambulances and all of us just riding on our brakes very slowly downhill, which absolutely I had not trained for. I just had no idea how to go down wet hills when we were all being speed controlled down them, basically being led down them. So I felt kind of underprepared for that, but you've got no choice but to keep going.
I'd say the first 20 miles were amazing going through London. I mean, as someone who's cycled in London for a long time, just going through these bits that I'd previously considered off limits were incredible. And that last 10 miles as well, getting over Wimbledon Hill, and then suddenly you just know it's 10 miles, it's downhill, you're gonna smash it. That was so exciting and so fun. I loved it. It really ended on a high, truly.
The last 25 miles for me were an absolute dream. From Leatherhead, pretty much, I felt like I absolutely had this. I was it's 25 miles is nothing, you know, like it just felt like nothing at all. Like, I was just like overtaking guys on Wimbledon Hill. That felt amazing. You know, I could really feel how close it was to being the end, but I wasn't like desperate for the finish. I was enjoying it, which felt amazing. Yeah, I think immediately afterwards, I wasn't convinced whether I'd do it again. But then I think, you know, none of us were focused on our time, but then we all really surprised ourselves, despite our various setbacks that we had, whether it was Alice having to stop at the mechanics or like I think all of us kept encountering those huge tailbacks of riders because of the weather conditions. And then you see your time, you're like, oh wow, like I bet I could get sub 6 on this. And then you're like, you know, and I'm not a competitive person, but cycling seems to have tapped into that and, you know, woken my dormant competitive person. It's just streaking out ahead, desperate to smash people out of the way. It's awful, but also seems to be quite enjoyable.
Riding in London is something I've always loved, and now I really like taking the skills that I've learned during this process and applying it to my commute. I love clipping in. I love being able to like use gears properly. I love the speed of it all and the reliance on it. And also, as someone who's always a bit of a fair weather cyclist, doing 7 hours in wind and rain means that I can't use that as an excuse not to get on the bike anymore.
Well done to Alice and Boudica, because I was quite impressed, I must say, having met them before and heard how little cycling they'd done, that they managed 100 miles, it seems, quite easily. Remarkable, really, unless they're just putting a real gloss on it. I don't know, but well done them, and thanks to Skoda for supporting them and for supporting us at the Cycling Podcast Féminin.
I like how now that you're back in your own territory, you reverted to Skoda. No more pretensions at European pronunciation. Skoda. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, Skoda.
Was it emotional saying goodbye to the Skoda?
We haven't said goodbye to it yet. Lionel Burney, who's sitting in the garden there, has still got the Skoda.
Hang on. So he made out that the reason he couldn't go to the final day in Paris and sort of made it sound that it was very easy for me to go and mop everything up from the final day of the Tour de France was because he had to race this Skoda back to not Watford.
They were going to pick it up, but they haven't yet. And so I phoned him the other day and he said, sorry, I'm in my company car. But Skoda, if you're listening, it's in not Watford.
Come and get it.
And available for collection. But thanks for, I mean, it's a wonderful car.
Yeah.
It did us well around the Tour de France.
And it's still doing you well.
Still doing well in the not Watford area. I don't know. I think it's more practical to fly to Innsbruck.
Yeah, I think it maybe is.
But we should wrap things up for this month. It's been a pretty varied programme this month. Thank you very much, Orla.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, guys.
And good luck, both of you, on the Rapha Women's 100.
Well, I don't need much luck. I'll be waving. I'll perfect my wave between now and then.
You get a maternity high-vis jacket.
Richard, how long have you known me? Do you really think I'm going to rock a high-vis? Don't think so. Leatherette hot pants, more like.
Well, worth turning up.
Well, yeah, it'll be there now. That'll bring in a huge crowd.
Brilliant.
I did actually do that in my first pregnancy, but I wore them through, so I'll have to find a new statement sartorial.
I don't even know how you can wear through a pair of leatherette hot pants, but it's best not asking.
Anyway, we'll be back. We'll do another episode before the World Championships, and then we'll do more from the World Championships.
Lovely.
So thank you very much, Orla.
Thank you very much, both.
Thank you very much, Rose.
Thank you, guys.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.